Good evening. As the liturgical year approaches the solemnity of Christ the King, the readings of the lectionary take an apocalyptic tone. They mention a period of great distress and tribulation with great cosmic signs. In the book of Daniel, as St. Michael the archangel arises, we hear that distress will affect not only the living, but even those who have already died. Even though this book is from the Old Testament, it speaks of a form of a final judgment for those who had already died. For it says, "Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake and shall live forever. Others shall be an everlasting horror and disgrace." The apocalyptic tone of the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark are even more striking. In those days, after that great tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will be falling from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaking. Notice that nobody is above this. No one can escape this. Everyone will be affected. Some will live forever. Others will experience eternal distress. That's what the readings of today say. And the question, of course, is, who do I want to be? Contrary to modern opinion, not everyone accepts heaven as a gift. Contrary to modern opinion, not everyone accepts heaven as a gift from God. Now, because we humans have always been fascinated with gruesome stories, with the juicy stories, the only part of the apocalyptic discourse of the Bible that we tend to focus on are the great signs, the terrible things, the shaking cosmic elements. But these are just signs. They are not ends in themselves. They are means. They are signs. Like a stop sign or a street sign that tells you this is the right way, that's the wrong way. The apocalyptic signs are only signs. But both the book of Daniel and the Gospel of Mark give us the main point regarding how we need to live now in order to spend eternity with God, because that's the goal. That's what we want to be. Daniel says, "But the wise shall shine brightly like the splendor of the firmament, and those who lead the many to justice shall be like the stars forever." In other words, if you want to be among the living for all eternity, be wise and lead people to justice. If you want to live forever, practice wisdom and justice. God's wisdom and God's justice. That's the message of the book of Daniel, the first reading of today. Now in the Gospel, Mark, we see another aspect of the eternity with God. We are not left to our own devices. We are not left orphans. Jesus, with his angels, come to help us. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out his angels and will gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the end of the sky. The word elect here can be translated as chosen ones. And as Christian followers of the Lord, that's exactly who we are by virtue of holy baptism. We have been chosen not because we are perfect. We have been chosen because our souls have been marked for the rest of our lives by the indissoluble seal of baptism. Nobody can wash that seal away from our souls. And yet we are called to live according to that dignity, to avoid sin, to avoid selfishness, to live according to the election that we have received from God by the dignity of being called Christians. But again, we are not left orphans. We are not abandoned to our own devices, to figure out everything ourselves in this hostile world. For the gospel itself says that the Son of Man, Jesus, sends his angels to gather the elect from the four winds. You can picture his army of angels gathering the chosen ones. Here your master comes, this way, coming over, it's this way, leading everybody to the Lord. The four winds is an image of the totality of the world. In every direction, the angels gather us towards the final destination, which is to be in the presence of God for all eternity. If we say yes to his invitation, of course. The best human image that I have for this is my own experience as a pilgrimage spiritual guide. And let me illustrate this for you. As you know, Father Andy and I have led several pilgrimages to the Holy Land, to the lands of St. Paul, recently to the Iberian Peninsula. Next year we're going to go to Rome. One of my jobs as a spiritual leader is to gather the flock. I like to stay at the end of the group, especially gathering the stragglers, the ones that are taking the last picture, the ones that are shopping the last item or buying the whole store, because everybody loves shopping. The group is moving. We're talking about a group of 40, 50 people. Remember, we're in a different country, different language, many times in very crowded areas, with people from all over the world, literally from the four winds. The likelihood of losing one pilgrim or leaving one pilgrim behind is very high. That's why I tend to stay in the back, gathering the flock, gathering the sheep. And of course, the other pilgrims help me to make sure that everyone is accounted for, that no one is missing, that no one is left behind. Sometimes I switch my role with Father Andy, but in general, I am the one who tries to stay in the back of the group. All right, enough shopping. That's okay. You're able to take more pictures later, but this way, please. We're all gathered over there. The group is moving. We don't want to lose you. Come on over. Blessed the people that God puts in our lives that help us not to get lost or to be left behind. On that day, says Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, I will send out the angels to gather his elect from the four winds, from the end of the earth to the end of the sky. Gather them to him. Finally, in the letter to the Hebrews, we also hear that Christ the high priest offered one sacrifice for sins and took his seat forever at the right hand of God. Now he waits until his enemies are made his footstool. And here is where we come in. Jesus indeed wants to gather us from the four corners of the earth. But in the meantime, we cooperate in the master plan of God of destroying the enemies of the Lamb by living lives of virtue, lives of honor, lives of goodness. We rely for that on the wisdom of God, leading others to God's justice, as we hold on to our dignity of being called God's chosen one, his elect. So, as we reflect on the readings of this very last Sunday of Ordinary Time, just before next weekend, which will be Christ the King, may we live according to the dignity that we have received in holy baptism, so that when the Son of Man comes in glory, we are not afraid of anything, but rather we rejoice in being gathered to him by his angels, so that we may be in his presence for all eternity. Amen.